People go
to public schools because one day they'll have to get married and get a job to earn money honestly. But it's not necessary that we have to get mundane knowledge. If we decide that we don't want to get married, then we don't have to go to public schools to get mundane knowledge. If we want to get married, then we need to acquire a skill that is needed for a job. The whole public education system is based on humanistic principles, which is atheistic. They will teach things like Darwinism, Big Bang, and other speculation that distract our attention away from Krishna. These are actually perverted visions of reality. People who embrace materialistic philosophies and theories pretend that their speculated concepts are normal and will lead to happiness and success. Unless a child understands that atheistic speculations are all perverted concepts that take one away from Krishna, they'll become vulnerable to being influenced by them. One can compare the atheistic view to poisonous snake. One should learn that poisonous snakes are to be avoided. This avoidance does not hinder one from having a full and productive life. Similarly, by avoiding the influence of atheistic theories does not obstruct one from having a productive life. If anything, it encourages one to think critically by understanding the pitfalls of atheistic speculations.
Okay, someone else read?
The whole in the Vedic age we had varnashrama. Varnas are acceptable occupations. First we have to figure out our varna and then figure out our ashrama. This should be done early in life. Everything depends on our motive. If our motive is to go back to God, then we can adjust our lives to achieve our goal. If we are misled to believe the goal of life is to earn money and enjoy sense gratification, then we will waste the rest of our lives doing that. This is a perverted vision of reality, by which one never achieves emotional stability, love, tolerance, compassion, humility,
etc.
etc. There are many examples that illustrate this point. One recent one is Steve Wen, who is a billionaire that owns gambling casinos in Las Vegas and Macau, China. He has been shamed by women.
Plural.
What?
Women.
Who claim he has abused them for his sense gratification. A counterexample is John Mead Hutzman, who was born in Blackfoot, Idaho, in a poor family. He was a member of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, a Mormon religious denomination. He built up several major companies and a billionaire. He's a billionaire. He had 9 children with his wife of 50 years. He's an example of pious and competent man who graduated from the Wharton School of Business, University of Pennsylvania. He has done much philanthropy and is respected by many people around the world.
So here we see people who have this perverted view of life. They think, like Steve Quinn and many, many other people like him, he's a billionaire. He owns casinos in Las Vegas and other places. And he thinks that the purpose of life is to make as much money as possible, and he's got plenty of money, and to enjoy sense gratification. But what do these people do? They take advantage of other people. They exploit them for their own sense gratification. So he exploits his workers to work really hard so that he can make more money, and he exploits poor women because he overpowers them with his luster and wealth and glitzy lifestyle. So, but then you have this man who's a Mormon. He's very religious. He was born in a poor family, but he worked really hard, got a good education, and he's a billionaire. He has several companies, and all of them are very successful. He does a lot of charity. He supports his church. He's been married. He was married for over 50 years. He just died recently. This man named Huntsman. He's got 9 kids. All his kids are really fine people. And he's respected by a lot of people around the world. So he's not a pure devotee, and by no means. He's a meat eater also. But he's lived a pious life. Now, the purpose of devotees is not simply to live a pious life. It's to actually attain pure love of Krishna. But these are 2 examples. One is a low-class billionaire, and the other one is a first-class normal human being. When I say normal human being, they believe in the sanctity of marriage. They believe in raising their kids to be good citizens of this country, and they work hard, they're honest, and so forth. One of his kids is an ambassador to Japan, and many of his other kids they're all highly educated and well established. Well, this is the point that what is our worldview? What is our goal in life? And traditionally, in India, children were either trained early in life to take over their father's trade. Like the father was a Brahmin, then they would become Brahmins. If the father was a businessman, like a farmer or a banker, the kids would become like that. Or if the father was a worker, then the kids would become workers. But then some kids would decide that they didn't want, like I said, to get married. So they would become trained for spiritual life, and they would spend their whole life engaged in devotional service. So you see, it all depends on what one's motive is. Now, most people will get married. The majority of people will get married. So therefore, you need to have a trade or a profession. And once you get the expertise by which you can earn an honest living, then you become firmly, or let's say stably established in your ashrama. It's usually beginning by being a brahmachari or brahmacharini, and then you get married, you become a grihastha, and then later on vanaprastha and so forth. So if our goal is to go back to Godhead, then we can follow the example of Prabhupada. He was educated, but he did not accept his degree because he was protesting against the British colonial government. So that meant the only thing he could do was to start his own business. So he did start his own business because he got a good education, and he became a pharmacist, and he made different products, and he earned his living honestly. He raised his 5 kids. He got them married, and when he was 59 years old, after the kids were grown up and properly married and situated in life, he took sannyas. And he prepared himself to follow his guru's order, which was to come to the United States. And he took care of his wife. He made sure his wife was financially secure and being protected by his elder sons. And he took sannyas, and then he spread the movement all over the world. See? So this Prabhupada is like not like John Huntsman, John Huntsman is a man who's a traditional pious person. Prabhupada is a transcendental, pure devotee. So there's a major difference between the two. But Prabhupada went through all the different stages as John Huntsman, but he followed the Vedic path, which is brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyas. Now, if one's family is completely Krishna conscious, there's no necessity for the husband to take sannyas, because they're all renounced and engaged in Krishna's service. But in general, one can do a lot more, let's say, good in society by accepting complete renunciation. Okay, so any questions about this? So what we're doing, yes?
So when we say that Krishna consciousness is meant for all ages and we should start as soon as possible, why is there like a system where you need to leave the house in the old age and then start practicing spirituality? Shouldn't that be there from the start?
Well, let's look at Prabhupada's example. He didn't start practicing spirituality after he left the house and took sannyas. He was practicing all along. Right? Just like your father is practicing spiritual life, but he's still working and taking care of his family. So no, that is the materialistic people's vision of spiritual life. You live 60 years enjoying family life, and then when you're sick and old and about to die, you take up spiritual life. But that doesn't work very well. Sit properly. That doesn't work very well. We have to practice spiritual life all along. We have to make a decision early in our life. What is the purpose of life? Say, okay, so we in this lecture also we discussed what is the purpose of material creation. Do you know? Yes.
People who don't want to follow Krishna's rule to come, like a place where they can enjoy for themselves,
That's not the purpose of it. That's the misuse of the purpose. Yeah.
To prepare ourselves in order to go to practice our devotional life and prepare ourselves in order to go back to God.
Yeah, that's the purpose of the material creation. It's to rehabilitate ourselves, to go back to Godhead. We came from Krishna, but we revolted against him. We misused our free will. So now we have given a chance in the material world to go back to Godhead. The purpose of material creation is not, let's go there and it's like Disneyland, let's just enjoy our senses. That's not the purpose. That's the misunderstanding of it. The real purpose is, it's a chance for us to go back to Godhead. It's just like a prison. Someone goes to prison because they commit sinful activity, right? But the purpose of the prison is to rehabilitate the prisoner so he can go back to normal society and live properly. That's the purpose. And if someone doesn't want to learn, then they keep them there to keep that person away from normal society because they're too dangerous. But if they learn their lesson, then they can go back and live as a normal person in society. So the material creation is an opportunity for people to rehabilitate themselves, to correct their perverted mentality, the sickness of, what's the sickness? Meat eating, gambling, and speculation, intoxication, and illicit connections. That's a sick person. That's the symptom of someone who fell down from the spiritual world and is completely in illusion in the material world. You should not think that that's a normal way of life. They want to convince you this is normal, eating meat and doing all these horrible things. That's normal. It's not normal. It's sick. What is normal is to become Krishna conscious. But when you become Krishna conscious, you don't become a, let's say, some kind of a freak. It's the normal way of life, because it's spiritual life, the eternal way of life. Okay, so now let's one of the girls want to read. We're Bhagavad Gita 13:20. So we just heard about Steve Wynn and John Huntsman, two examples of billionaires. One is a low-class piece of scum, and the other guy is a very pious person. He's not a pure devotee. Don't mistake him. Prabhupada was a pure devotee. But he's a pious person. He was married for 50 years. He did a lot of charity and good acts. And he's very well respected. And all his kids grew up to be fine people. You know. So there's two examples there of billionaires. One is low class, one is first class human being. But not necessarily a pure devotee, but still a very pious person. Okay, so let's read.
Translation?
Bhagavad Gita 13:20, yes.
Material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of matter are products of the material nature.
In other words, our soul is not something material. Only our body is something material. And therefore it's going to be affected by the material nature, the modes of material nature, time. And what does time do and what do the modes of material nature do? They transform things. So you get transformed from a little fish to an ovum, to a fetus, to a child, and then eventually an old man or old lady, and then you die. So these transformations are going on, but they're caused by the material nature. It doesn't affect your soul. Okay, go ahead.
By the knowledge given in this chapter, one can understand the body, the field of activities, and the knowers of the body, both the individual soul and the super soul.
So anyone who's come late, you can get the transcript from another. Huh? Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The body is the field of activity and is composed of material nature. The individual soul that is embodied and enjoying the activities of the body is the Purusha, or living entity. He is one knower and the other is the super soul. Of course, it is to be understood that both the super soul and the individual entity are different manifestations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The living entity is in the category of his energy, and the super soul is in the category of his personal expansion.
So this is an important point. Krishna is the energetic, the source of everything. And everything that comes from Krishna is his energy. It belongs to him. So we are the jivas, we come from Krishna, we are his energy. Right? So we actually belong to him. This idea that I am the proprietor, I am the enjoyer, I am the dominator, it's all Maya. We are the energy of Krishna, therefore we should be serving Krishna. Right? If something belongs to you, then it should be used for your needs. But we actually belong to Krishna. Not only we, the material nature belongs to Krishna. Everything in it belongs to Krishna. The Brahma Jyoti belongs to Krishna. Paramatma belongs to Krishna. Time belongs to Krishna. All these things belong to Krishna, so they should only be used in Krishna's service. When we use them for our own selfish purposes, we get caught in the entanglement of karma. You see? As soon as we divert from using things meant to please Krishna, using them for our own selfish purposes, we get caught by the laws of karma. And then we're put in prison. What is the prison? It's called Martya Loka, the world of death. Our soul is eternal, but now we're subjected to death, old age, disease, all these things that are not normal. We should not accept them as normal. Old age, birth, death, old age, and disease. They're actually signs of our sickness. And the sickness is, we forgot Krishna, we revolted against Krishna, and we're put in the prison house. Now we're all prisoners, but we're given a chance in the prison house to correct ourselves. Okay, go ahead.
Both material nature and the living entity are eternal. That is to say that they existed before the creation. The material manifestation is from the energy of the Supreme Lord, and so also are the living entities. But the living entities are of the superior energy. Both the living entities and material nature existed before this cosmos was manifested.
Cosmos means the universe.
Okay.
So you see, material creation or material nature is eternal. It's not temporary. And therefore, two things can happen to us. Either we can stay eternally in the material world, or we can live eternally in the spiritual world. It's up to us. Staying eternally in the material world means you suffer continually. Going back to Godhead means that you have real enjoyment, transcendental enjoyment that's unending. So we have to decide at an early age what we want to do. We want to continue in the material world, birth after birth, or we want to go back to Godhead. We have to fix our goal. If our goal is to stay in the material world, birth after birth, suffer, and have frustration and illusion, envy, greed, okay, fine, you can do it eternally. Or you want to go back to Godhead and be eternally happy, no frustration, no envy, no greed, no anger, no meanness, only compassion and love. You can do that too. It all depends on what you want. Go ahead.
Material nature was absorbed in the spiritual personality of Godhead, Mahavishnu, and when it was required, it was manifested by the energy of the
agency.
By the agency of the Mahatattva.
Okay, Mahatattva is the total material energy, but when the modes of material nature and the time element are acting. Before the Mahatattva, there's called Pradhana. Pradhana is the material nature in a neutral state, where the modes of material nature and time are not acting. So everything is at a standstill. Yes? Mahatattva means the great, let's say, the active state of material energy. Mahat Tattva. Tattva usually means the truth. Mahat means big truth. But it's the active state of the material energy when the modes of material nature and time are pushing things to interact. And the pradhana, Pradhana, is the inactive state of material nature. Or actually it's called avyakta state, unmanifest state. What? Yeah. Just like Einstein was talking about, E equals mc squared. In other words, energy at one point can transform into matter. And it can go backwards also. The matter can transform back into energy. So it's something like that. It's more complicated than that, but it's something like that. Einstein figured that out. He's a very smart man. Okay, go ahead.
Similarly, the living entities are also in him, and because they are conditioned, they are averse to serving the Supreme Lord. Thus, they are not allowed to enter into the spiritual sky. But with the coming forth of material nature, these living entities are again given a chance to act in the material world and prepare themselves to enter the spiritual world. That is the mystery of this material creation.
Okay, you see, that's the purpose of material creation. It's a mystery. Most people don't understand what this material creation is all about. Okay, what do you think if you did a survey, if you went to your school and you asked your school classmates, you say, hey man, you know what the material nature is all about, what material creation is all about? What would they say? What? Tell them this world. What's this world? What's the purpose of this world?
You said that earlier in another class.
No, what would they say? Not you. What would your friends say?
They would say, what is this?
What? Yeah, you see? They don't even understand what the purpose of the material world is. They got it all wrong.
Prepare to go back to Krishna.
Yeah, that's the purpose. So, for example, let's say you buy a brand new car, you drive out of the dealership and you go in the wrong direction. Right? Is that good? Huh? Well, anyway, no, even if you go and drive legally, but if you go in the wrong direction, you'll never get to where you're trying to go to, right? So that's the whole point. Right from the beginning, kids misunderstand. They're never really taught what's the purpose of material creation. So that means their whole life they're going to be misled. They think, oh, the purpose is to enjoy. That just gets you more entangled in the cycle of birth and death. Therefore, because the soul is eternal, you can remain eternally in the material world. So you see how people are so dumb. They can't even, they're not given the information. What is the purpose of material creation? But on the other hand, they arrive at the false conclusion that it's to enjoy. Why don't you do a survey? Ask the different kids in your class, what do you think the purpose of this material creation is? And see what they say. Okay, go ahead. Okay, well, you see, it's sad. They're supposed to be in school to get an education. What they're getting is the opposite, non-education. Go ahead.
Actually, the living entity is originally the spiritual part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. But due to his rebellious nature, he is conditioned within material nature. It really does not matter how these living entities or superior entities of the Supreme Lord have come in contact with material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead knows, however, how and why this actually took place. In the scriptures, the Lord says that those attracted by this material nature are undergoing a hard struggle for existence. But we should know it with certainty from the descriptions of these few verses that all transformations and influences of the material nature by the three modes are also productions of the material nature. All transformations and variety in respect to living entities are due to the body. As far as script is concerned, as far as spirit is concerned, living entities are all the same.
That means we're all part and parcel of Krishna. We're all eternal, and we all have a transcendental destiny. Okay, somebody else read? Who's next? Okay, go ahead, read. The Brahmajyoti.
The Brahmajyoti, material nature, and everything manifest or unmanifest, or his energies.
Krishna's energies. His should be capitalized. Yeah. Go ahead.
Nothing is independent of him.
That should be capitalized also.
4 points that we should remember. 1. Purpose of material creation. 2. Attraction to material nature leads to a hard struggle for existence. 3. Essence of the Bhagavad Gita. As soon as the darkness of the heart is removed by Krishna consciousness, the devotee does not have to worry about anything. Krishna will automatically provide anything the devotee wants.
Okay, that is Bhagavad Gita, 10, 11. You have to
4.
add that note. That point comes from Bhagavad Gita, 10th chapter, 11th verse. And then purpose of material creation, to prepare ourselves to go back to Godhead.
4. Sin is a symptom of material disease. If we are always in devotional service, then we will not get attracted by material nature and be saved from the whirlpool or struggle for existence.
So as soon as we're attracted to material nature, we end up in the struggle for existence. We begin to struggle. Like, for example, I'll give you an example. Let's say there was the gold rush. Have you read about the gold rush, the California gold rush in the 1850s and 60s and 70s? So many people that lived on the East Coast decided to go through the danger of crossing the whole United States to get to California to become rich by prospecting for gold. And then after that gold rush, there was the Alaska gold rush. It's even worse. They go up to the freezing cold in Alaska to mine gold, right? Now, a lot of people died doing that, right? And for different reasons. But some people did get a little bit rich, and a few people became very rich. Right? But a lot of people struggled. I mean, there was a huge struggle. Imagine there was no trains, no airplanes. There was just covered wagons and horses, or just walking. So they have to walk from New York all the way to California, going over the Rocky Mountains. And if you get caught in the winter, you're dead. Right? And then there's Indians also who would attack them. Then there were bears and snakes and buffaloes and all kinds of, danger, right? So, and all this was to get rich. So as soon as they became attracted to this, they went through this struggle. And that's what it's saying. Anytime you become attracted to something material, then struggle begins. Okay, go ahead.
SB explanation. The living being and the material nature, both of them exist eternally. Example. Before the time of cosmic creation is similar to the construction of a big building. We should not make a mistake that while the building is constructed, the building materials and the residents of the building are also created. The residents of the building and the materials of the building were there in the potential stage even prior to the construction of the building. Therefore, in this sloka, the word anadi has been purposely used. Anadi means beginningless. Therefore, the living entities and the material nature as potency of the Supreme Lord remained existent even before the birth of time and space measurement of cosmic manifestation.
Okay, now this is something that a Christian, a Jew, and a Muslim would probably not accept. That the material nature, the different jivas or spiritual, they were all existing before birth in the material world. They would probably not accept it because their conception of eternality is not complete eternality, before birth in the body, and after death in the body. Their idea is you only begin to exist when you get the body. And so they have an incomplete and because of that incomplete understanding of the eternal soul, they don't believe in karma and reincarnation. They believe in karma, but they don't believe in reincarnation. Therefore, you only have one life. Either you make it or you break it. So, you see, educated people, when they look at the philosophy of Christianity, apart from Jesus saves and Jesus is love and all that stuff, which is good, but when they look at the other parts of the philosophy, they just look at it and they say, this doesn't make sense. This is nonsense. You only have one chance, and you either make it or break it. And if you're not a Christian, then you're lost. Right? So it's not. It doesn't make sense. Go ahead.
Past, present, and future. All these were born along with the cosmos, but the living entity Purusha and the material nature Prakriti both are transcendental to this cosmic time and space. It is never to be understood that the living entity or the material nature are born within the limits of time and space. As the Supreme Lord is ever existent, so also his different
Wait a minute.
potencies.
Did you say are born into cosmic time and space?
Are born within the limits of time and space.
Are you reading from the book or are you reading from the notes?
The notes.
It says transcendental. Oh no, okay, I'm sorry. Past, present, and future, all these were born along with the cosmos. But, meaning the three periods of time. Time is eternal, but we perceive it in a linear way in the material world as past, present, and future. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
As the Supreme Lord is ever existent, so also his different potencies. The material nature becomes manifested as the cosmic universe and the living entities are impregnated within the material nature by the supreme will of the Lord. The section of living entities is conditional soul who are impregnated within this material nature are, so to say, disobedient sons of the Lord who refuse to obey the supremacy of the Lord and try to make an overlordship over the material nature.
Okay, so that's describing us. All of us originally revolted against Krishna. That's why we're here. And we tried to come to the material world and be a dominator and an enjoyer. And the more we try and be dominator and enjoyer, the more we get entangled in by the laws of karma. So unless we get spiritual education, we'll just keep doing that. And it's like chewing the chewed. It's like same old, same old. What is revolutionary is to learn that, you don't have to be conditioned eternally in the material world, that you can break away from it and liberate yourself from it. So that's why the idea in all religions of salvation is called the gospel. The gospel means the good news. The good news is you can be liberated from this cycle of birth and death. So go ahead.
This temperament of disobedience to the will of the Lord, desire to lord it over the material nature, is the root of all vices.
Okay, so this is an important point. So if you tell a person, hey man, you shouldn't be eating meat. If you had told me when I was, let's say, 16 that I shouldn't eat meat, I would have told you, mind your own business. Who do you think you are trying to tell me what to do? That's called disobedience. And that's called an obstinate nature. It's called ignorance. You see, so here he's saying that this temperament of disobedience, in other words, if your mom or pop said, hey, you should chant your rounds, and in your mind you say, I don't want to chant my rounds. That's the temperament of disobedience, you see. And that is coming from the desire to lord it over material nature, and it's the root of all sin. See? So we should understand this point. The root of all sin is the temperament of disobedience. In other words, the tendency to be disobedient, to not want to follow the rules. So as long as we have that feeling in our mind, we're in trouble. We experience a lot of trouble like that. It's much easier to follow the rules of spiritual life. And life becomes much easier if you follow them. And life becomes much, much harder by not following them. Okay, go ahead.
Otherwise, the living being in his natural state is the purest of the pure, as the Lord is inconceivable.
Is the purest.
Is the purest of the pure. How the spirit of disobedience came into being in the pure nature of the soul is an inconceivable speculation in our present state. The only explanation...
Yeah, that's like a man who's in the midst of a forest fire, and he sits down on a log and said, I'm not leaving till I figure out how this happened. You see. And you think he's going to figure it out? No. What's going to happen to him?
He's going to die.
He's going to die, right? So we don't have to figure out exactly what we did to leave Krishna, because we're already here. That means we did leave Krishna, right? We should figure out how to get out of the forest fire as quick as possible, right? We shouldn't be stupid enough to say, "Oh, I'm not moving until I figure this all out." You know, what was the original reason that I fell down? You know, was it meat eating? Was it intoxication? You know, it's obviously we fell down. That's what, because otherwise we wouldn't be here, right? We'd still be in the spiritual world. So therefore, our priority should be to figure out, to get the information how to get out of this mess. All right, go ahead.
The only explanation can be offered in this connection is that even our present state of life, there are some men who are devoted to the Lord, while there are others who do not believe in the existence of the Lord. Sometimes we meet persons who frankly say that they have no belief in God, and if we want to rectify such misconception about God, even then they refuse to entertain discussion. Now, who is right and who is wrong? The man who believes in God has many supporters in authentic literature all over the world. The Vedas, the Bible, the Quran, and all such authentic literatures are tangible support to the man who believes in God. But the unbelievers have practically no support save except of some irrational argument of begging the question.
Okay, you know what begging the question is? Begging the question means you ask a question, and then you assume that what you asked is true, and then you continue from there. So, like an example of begging a question is, you say, "I don't believe God exists," you know, and then right after that, they say, "God doesn't exist," you know, what you're saying is crazy. You know, you say God exists. God doesn't exist. You know, so all of a sudden they pose a question, and then they assume that what they said is true, and they start arguing on that basis. That's called begging the question. You see, it's called a fallacy, a false argument. Just like, you know, Trump colluded with the Russians, and we know for sure it's true. But where's the proof that he did it? No, the proof is we said that he did it, right? That's the proof. That's called begging the question. See? And people do this all the time, especially in politics, and people who are hell-bent on winning an argument. So they just assume that the question they're asking is true, and then they just argue on that basis that, you know, you're wrong because what I said is true. You know. Okay, go ahead.
Now, how this happens. When the God believers were born, or when the unbelievers were born, nobody can say, but still, in fact, we can experience that there's a class of believers and a class of unbelievers, never mind how and when they came in existence. For the present, we can simply accept that there are two classes of men, or living entities. The unbelievers are called materialists, and the believers are called spiritualists. The more a man becomes a spiritualist, the more and more he becomes freed from the contamination of material qualities.
Now, that's my whole point. If we look at sinful activity, meat eating, etc., as a sickness, it's the same as you look at a poisonous snake as something to avoid. Does that hurt your life because you avoid a poisonous snake? No. In fact, it enhances your life. It makes your life better. So, and you can have a fully productive life by understanding that meat eating, gambling, illicit connections, and intoxication are sicknesses. They're not normal behavior. See? It doesn't hinder you from having a full, productive, and happy life. In fact, it helps you have a full, productive, happy life. And the example is the difference between Steve Wynn and John Huntsman. Okay? Who can explain the difference between Steve Wynn and John Huntsman? Yes. Give him the microphone. Now this is a actual example.
Steve Wynn was a billionaire, and he wasted his money and did a lot of bad stuff like exploit people because he thought he had power and money, and that's why he did it.
Yeah, Steve Wynn is still alive. He didn't die. Huntsman died recently, just like a couple days ago.
Was a pious person. He was a member of the church. He was a Mormon, and he believed in religious activities, and he was really he did a bunch of charity. He helped his wife and his children, and everyone appreciates him.
And he's a billionaire, right? They're both billionaires. One is a nonsense, a scumbag, and the other one is a first-class person. And again, Huntsman is not a pure devotee, but he's a pious person, right? So, he believes in God. He believes in his family. Does that make him less of a person? No, it made him a better person, right? So therefore, we should look at sinful activity as a sickness, as not normal human behavior. See? And the proof is, Steve Wynn is disrespected now because he used his influence and his money and his prestige to take advantage of poor women and exploit people. And Huntsman is greatly respected because he respected other people. He's been married. He was married for over 50 years. He had 9 kids. He trained his kids to be good people. So, by looking at sinful activity as a sickness, it's not that you're missing anything. It's like looking at a poisonous snake. It's something to avoid. It's not something to embrace. If you embrace it, that means you're stupid, right? But yet, the materialists, they want to convince us that sinful activities are actually good, and not engaging in them is actually bad. So, okay, go ahead. Let's finish up now. All right, see, I guess you just get the microphone. You want to read? All right, 1 minute. Go ahead.
The material qualities in their varied degree are all vices, while the spiritual qualities are inborn qualities of the spirit soul, which are exhibited as virtues in the material world in contact with the material vices. Otherwise, all virtues are all spiritual. All virtues are all spiritual, and they are ever existent with the spirit soul. The vices are described as vikara or derangement.
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 That means like a state of being crazy.
When a man is overtaken by evil spirit and haunted by it, the brain of a man becomes deranged, and in the madness of deranged condition, a man can perform many things unnatural to him in his natural condition.
Yes, it's in other words, it's saying sins are sicknesses. They're not normal. It's not the normal way of life. But yet, you go to school and kids around you are eating meat, and they all say, "Oh, it's so good, man. You're missing everything. You know, you don't know it's good." You know, they're trying to act as if this is the proper thing to do. That's what Prabhupada is saying here. That's actually a sickness. It's not normal. Go ahead.
Me?
Points from the above paragraph. Read.
Points from the above paragraph. 1. You start with the known to understand the unknown. Like today, there are some people who believe in God and some people don't. 2. Begging the question is a logical fallacy in which the writer or speaker assumes the statement under examination to be true. In other words, begging the question involves using a premise to support itself. If the premise is questionable, then the argument is bad.
Okay,
3.
so the first point, you start with the known to understand the unknown. Well, Prabhupada said, it's impossible to figure out exactly the reason why we fell down from the spiritual world. But you don't have to figure that out as a preamble to beginning spiritual life, because we already know we fell down. And the general reason is we revolted against Krishna. What is the exact reason why we revolted against Krishna? You don't have to know that. Like, for example, if you have a cold, or if you're in the middle of a forest fire and you sit down and say, I'm not moving till I figure out how the forest fire started. That's a stupid thing, because you'll be dead by the time you figure it out. And you still won't figure it out. But you can figure it out after you free yourself from the forest fire. You run as fast as you can, you get away from it, and then you can sit down all you want and try and figure out how did it start. You see? So, all we know is that we're all in a fallen state. We're in the material world, we're subject to birth, death, old age, and disease. This is a fallen state. So we should do everything to get out of this predicament. Then begging the question, okay, we know what that is. And next?
3. Sin is not inherent in living entities. This is an acquired sickness got by associating with material nature.
Yeah, like for example, if you get a cough and you get pain all over your body and you feel terrible, is that normal? No. So sin is like that. It's not a normal thing to commit sinful activities, meat eating, gambling, and so forth. It's a sign of a sickness. Go ahead.
4. We come with so many tendencies from our previous lives, but we can be trained to discard the wrong tendencies and accept the right ones. Sickest people are those who refuse to be trained. All depends on who one associates with.
Yeah, so if we associate with devotees, then we can overcome our acquired material discrepancies, right? Like for example, someone says, well, I'm attracted to, rap music. Well, that's probably coming from a previous life when you were in the jungle in Africa, and playing drums and, singing like that, right? So you get attracted to this rap music. But you can overcome it by associating with devotees and chanting Hare Krishna, because it's not the normal state of the human being to be attracted to that kind of nonsense. It all depends on who you associate with. Go ahead. But if you refuse to be trained, then there's no hope. Go ahead.
When people become captivated by Maya, they commit one sin after the other.
Yes.
So like they do
They
do something small and then they do something big.
Yeah, there's a saying in French, qui vole un œuf volera un bœuf. This means if you steal an egg, eventually you steal a whole bull. You'll steal a whole cow. In other words, in English we also say that. Anyway, if you I forget exactly how you say it in English. If you take an inch, you'll take a mile. Right. So if you steal an eraser, eventually you'll steal $1,000. Right. Right. So therefore, sin begins with little things, and then it expands. The more you feel confident that you can get away with things, it'll expand until you do something really horrible. Okay, continue reading.
Karya, or the finished body that a living entity gets as the covering of his pure self, is created by the laws of nature. Karana, or the senses and the mind, are also product of the material nature, and therefore she is the cause of all these senses. Kartrita, or the control of actions, are also done by Prakriti. The planetary actions as described in astronomy are some of the controls or kartrika of the material nature. In the revealed scriptures, we find that there is control of different deities whom we call by the name of Devata, a god even on the movement of her eyelids. So this control is also created by Prakriti by her stringent laws. No living being can change such laws even by the highest perfection of scientific knowledge. The so-called scientific knowledge of the mundane scientists are different varieties of illusions only to bewilder from spiritual on the conditioned souls who have fallen from the pure state of
Okay,
existence.
that has to be corrected. Only to bewilder the conditioned souls who have fallen from the pure state of existence, and such illusory scientific knowledge help us only in increasing the duration of our material existence. So,
Helps us to be.
helps us, yes. The so-called scientific knowledge of the mundane scientists are different varieties of illusions only to bewilder the conditioned soul. So cross out from spiritual on. To bewilder the conditioned souls who have fallen from the pure state of existence, and such illusory scientific knowledge helps us get rid of only in increasing the duration of our material existence. Okay, so we'll stop right there.
Yashomati Nandana Brajabara Nagara Gokula Ranjana Kana Shomati Nandana Brajabara Nagara Gokula Ranjana Kana Gopi Paranadana Madana Manohara Gopi Paranadana Madana Manohara Kaliya Damana Vidana Kaliya Damana Vidana Amala Harina Mami Avilasa Amala Harina Mami Avilasa Vipina Purandara Navina Nagara Bora Pamsi Badana Suvasa Pamsi Badana Suvasa Prajajana Palana Surakula Nasana Prajajana Palana Surakula Nasana Nanda Godana Rakovala Nanda Godana Rakovala Govinda Madhava Navanita Taskara Govinda Madhava Navanita Taskara Sundarananda Gopala Sundarananda Gopala Jamuna Tatachara Gopi Pasanahara Rasarasika Kripamoya Shri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Natabana Shri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Natabana Bhakti Vinodashraya Bhakti Vinodashraya Yashomati Nandana Brajabaranagara Gokula Ranjana Kana Gopi Paranadana Madana Manohara Gopi Paranadana Madana Manohara Kaliya Damana Vidana Kaliya Damana Vidana Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jayo Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radha Jayo Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radha Jayo Jagannatha Jayo Jagannatha Jayo Baladeva Jayo Subhadra Jayo Sitaram Jayo Lakshman Hanuman Jayo Sitaram Jayo Lakshman Hanuman Nitya Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitya Gaura Hari Bol
जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस सर्वज्ञाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्रीमद एसी भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस सर्वज्ञाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की। अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की। नमाचार्य श्रीदास हरिदास ठाकुर की। इस्कॉन फाउंडर आचार्य श्रील प्रभुपाद की। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की। राधा नीला माधव की। श्री वृंदावन धाम की। श्री मायापुर धाम की। जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की। गंगा माई की। यमुना माई की। तुलसी देवी की। भक्ति देवी की। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की। Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotee. All glories to the assembled devotee. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki.
Well, let's try and finish this. Who was reading? Okay, so Krishna 1, you want to continue reading? Microphone? Here it is, here it is, here it is, here it is.
I'm reading right now. The so-called scientific knowledge of the mundane scientists are different varieties of illusions only to bewilder the conditioned souls who have fallen from the pure state of existence. In such illusory scientific knowledge can help us in
What? What did you say?
In increasing the duration of our material existence. The so-called scientific knowledge is prompted by a desire to lord it over the material nature, which is the root cause of all vices, as described above. So Prakriti is the cause of all the above-mentioned states, namely the material body, the senses, and the control.
Okay, very good. Points from the paragraph above.
Points from the paragraph above. 1. The scientists assume that there were pre-existing laws in the universe. Originally, they thought that these laws were created by God, but when they became
Oh.
Because
Yeah, that's a mistake.
but when they became more and more
successful.
But when they became more and more successful, they started removing God from
They removed.
removed God from the
Take out
equation.
started, yeah. From the equation. In other
The
words,
scientists want to dominate everything and exploit it for their sense gratification, which is the root of all sin. When we think ourselves as Purusha or the enjoyer and control something like money or people, we become entangled in the karma bandh or the net of karma. Krishna is not responsible for the suffering of the living entity. The living entity is himself or herself responsible for the suffering. This is explained in BG 5.15, 5th chapter, 15th verse.
okay, so these points, these summary points are very important. The scientists assume that there are pre-existing laws in the universe. That's true. What do? They try and find what those laws are, like the law of gravity, the law of thermodynamics, Newton's laws of motion. So originally they thought that God created these laws, which is correct. But when they started using or controlling little parts of material nature, that it became puffed up, and they threw out God. And they said, well, they're just laws, that's all. They just exist. Right? Now, does that make sense? Is that a logical statement? They're just laws, they just exist.
No.
No, like, what is a law? Who makes a law?
God.
A lawmaker, like the Congress of the United States makes laws, right? It's like Obama made a law, anyone can come to the country, they don't have to go through immigration and customs, they just walk across the Rio Grande River, and right away they get everything, apartments, food stamps, and free education and everything.
Free?
Did you just walk across the Rio Grande River?
No.
How long did it take you to get your green card? 8 years, right? And it costs money, right? And you had to go through a lot of medical examination, this thing, that thing, right? And Obama passes the law. You just walk across the river, we'll give you everything, You can walk across with tuberculosis, that's okay, You could be a member of MS-13, the violent gang from El Salvador. It's okay. You come murder our people, it's okay, Yeah. So what did Trump do? He eliminated that. He didn't make a law, but he invited people to just walk into the country, Not Indians, no, Indians. Well, there are some Indians that went to Mexico. They flew to Mexico, and then they walked across the Rio Grande. And there's Pakistanis that did it. There are Afghanis that did it. There were terrorists also that did it. And then there were the gangs, the MS-13 gang from El Salvador. They came in with at least 1,000 or more gang members. Yeah. So lawmakers make laws. Laws just don't make themselves. So is it a rational statement that, laws just exist? No, it's crazy. Okay, don't play games. All right, and then secondly, scientists want to dominate everything and exploit it for their sense gratification, which is the root of all sin. So we see that this modern science, but accelerated by Darwin, brought about the degradation of religious activity in modern times. And religion is definitely in decline. It's not increasing, it's decreasing, religious activity. And nowadays, even you go to an elementary school, a kid will say, I'm an atheist. Right? There was one kid in Synergy, he was an atheist.
Oh, Kyle?
Kyle, yeah.
I know.
Kyle. Oh.
Yeah.
He was saying, I don't believe this Krishna, I don't believe
And
in
then
that.
everyone was going to him like, yeah, Krishna's real. And he got like so mad that
And then
he
he
left.
used to play this game, I don't know, this Mario game based on some video game. And then when other people went to play something good, better, and then he always said, why does everyone want to not do nonsense? Let's do nonsense. Basically, that's what he's saying.
Yeah. But you do nonsense, right?
Yeah, a lot.
So Kyle won. You lost. If you win, then Kyle would have stopped doing nonsense. So you have to learn how to be a preacher so you can stop people from doing nonsense. That's what preachers do. Okay, and then, so that's the root of all sin, the idea to dominate material nature for sense gratification. And when we think ourselves the Purusha, or the enjoyer, and we control something like money or people, we become entangled in the karma band, or the net of karma. And Krishna is not responsible for the suffering of a living entity. The living entity is himself or herself responsible for suffering. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita 5:15. Okay, so who's going to read now? Let's see, one other girl. Yeah, go ahead. Give the microphone over.
But you already read.
Shivani, you already read. Let somebody else read.
Yeah.
Let someone else read over there. Here, she's going to read.
Okay.
Nadate kasyachit papam. Just read the English. Nor does the Spirit, Supreme Lord.
Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. The Sanskrit word vibhu means the Supreme Lord who is full of unlimited knowledge, riches, strength, fame, beauty, and renunciation. He's always satisfied in
Okay,
himself,
let's listen. Let's listen.
undisturbed by sinful or pious activities. He does not create a particular situation for any living entity, but the living entity, bewildered by ignorance, desires to be put into certain conditions of life, and thereby his chain of action and reactions begins.
Okay, now that's an extremely important point. Krishna doesn't force you to be ignorant. He doesn't force you to be in Maya. He doesn't force you to do nonsense. But the living entity desires to be put into certain conditions of life. Because the living entity is bewildered by ignorance, and thus begins the chain of action and reaction. So everything depends on our desire. So how are we going to learn through proper education not to be a victim of our own ignorance? Anyone have any theory? How can we... So Krishna one, you have a theory?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm not Krishna one.
I mean Krishna two, you have a theory?
What do you mean?
Like the question I just asked, do you know what the question is?
No.
Were you listening?
No.
Were you speaking to Agastya?
Yeah.
So you're going to listen?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to play 12 feet?
No.
Then listen. Otherwise you're going to have to sit right over here. I can keep my eye on you. Okay, so the question is, how are we going to train ourselves not to be overwhelmed by ignorance, by which we do nonsense? Okay, so you have any theories, Prabhu? Yeah. No, the guy behind you. No, you. No, you. Go ahead. What's your theory? Yeah. Yes. You don't have a theory. Do you know what the question is? No. So were you listening? Okay. Anybody listened and knows what the question is? Sai. Sai is good. See, he can do nonsense and still remember the question.
How can you come out of your own self-ignorance?
And stop doing nonsense, right? Were you doing nonsense also? Somewhat, yeah. Okay, so now the question is, anybody have a theory? Arush, you have a theory? Do you know what the question is? Huh? What's the question? Speak out loud, come on. How to? Were you listening? No, okay. So anybody have a theory? Okay, Pranay, what's your theory?
To get out of your own ignorance
And stop
doing nonsense,
doing nonsense. Yeah.
I believe that you should engage in Krishna consciousness and associate.
Engage in Krishna consciousness. That's good English? So what would good English be?
Krishna consciousness
Activities. Activities, yes.
and associate with devotees.
Yeah.
Devotions.
Okay, now if you don't do that, what happens? Look at the notes. If you don't do that.
You'll be disturbed by sinful or pious activities. And you'll be bewildered by ignorance.
Yes. And No, you'll be put into certain conditions of life. In other words, you'll be put in a condition of life where you associate with other nonsense people. And then the chain of action and reaction begins. You got it? The chain of action and reaction. In other words, you do nonsense, you get a reaction. Like, Harivilas will ask you a question. Pranay, you know the question. He's were you listening? No, I wasn't listening. Were you doing nonsense? Yes, I was doing nonsense. Not, but you didn't. You were listening. I'm sorry. Okay, so let's continue reading.
A living entity is, by superior nature, full of knowledge. Nevertheless, he is prone to be influenced by ignorance due to his limited power. The Lord is omnipotent, but the living entity is not. The Lord is Vibhu, or omniscient, but the living entity is Anu, or atomic. Because he is a living soul, he has the capacity to desire by his free will. Such desire is fulfilled only by the omnipotent Lord. Omnipotent Lord. And so, when the living entity is bewildered in his desires, the Lord allows him to fulfill those desires. But the Lord is never responsible for the actions and reactions of the particular situation which may be desired.
So, what do you learn from this, Krishna 2? What was just read? Did you learn anything? Were you listening? Why don't you look at the notes? Read the notes and see if you learned something. Yes, Prabhu.
We learned that when Krishna...
Microphone. What happened to the microphone? Oh, it's all right. Go ahead. Speak loudly.
Krishna doesn't place us in like any condition of life, but then we, since we're free souls, we desire to be in a certain condition of life.
Yeah.
And then our cycle of action and reaction starts, and we kind of get that.
Right. So that means if you desire something bad, eventually Krishna will let you do it. Yes, Prabhu. Yes. Okay, say that again. I didn't hear you.
Everything that comes from Krishna is energy.
It's Krishna's energy, yes. Correct. Okay, Pranay, yes.
We also learned that Krishna is not he's not responsible for any of the actions that we do. And if we're
Yes, whoa, Krishna too. Wow, you woke up. Good.
I learned that when you say, like, this happens to me sometimes, I try to not think it, but, like, my mom's like, wake up, read Bhagavad Gita, do your chanting. I don't want to do that chanting.
Yeah, that's called the disposition for disobedience.
Yeah, disobedience.
So is that a good thing?
No.
So how are you going to overcome it?
By chanting.
By doing the very thing your mom asked you to do, right? Okay, so now we're going to learn some psychology. You ready?
Yes.
There are 3 psychological steps before any action. They are 1, thinking, 2, feeling, 3, what's the third one? What's the third one?
Willing.
Yes, okay. So pay attention, right? Okay. So 3 psychological steps before an action. There's thinking, feeling, and willing. Like, for example, let's say Krishna 2's mom says, Krishna 2, chant Hare Krishna. And Krishna 2 is thinking, I don't want to do that. Right? But then you think, instead of doing that, I'm just going to play a computer game. Because if I play a computer game, it'll feel good. And if I don't play the computer game, I won't be happy. I have to do it. And then what do? Play the computer game. So 3 steps. Thinking, feeling, willing. So Krishna consciousness acts on the level of thinking, feeling, and willing before you act. Krishna consciousness acts on the level of thinking, feeling, and willing. So if you think, I don't want to do what my mom says, chant Hare Krishna. I want to play a computer game. But wait a minute. Harivilas taught me 7 principles of logic. Point 1. Accept everything favorable for Krishna. Yes, Arush, you want to say them?
You have to be loud.
Give him the microphone. Yeah. We'll give you back the microphone. We should have 2 microphones here.
Accept everything which is favorable to Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
And reject everything which is not to Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
Always remember Krishna.
Yes.
Never forget Krishna.
Yes.
When in doubt, ask Shiksha or Diksha Guru.
Correct.
Do only those things that are pleasing to God, to Krishna.
Yes.
And when in doubt, verification of triangle, Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu.
Very good. So, Krishna 1. How does Krishna consciousness act on the level of thinking, feeling, and willing in the particular instance when your mother says, chant Hare Krishna, and you think, I don't want to chant Hare Krishna? What should you do?
Harivilas Prabhu said these 8 standard points of logic.
Which is, and number 1 is? What's number 1?
Everything that's favorable of Krishna.
So, is playing the video game instead of chanting Hare Krishna favorable to Krishna? Is it favorable? Huh? No. So then what should you do?
You should reject everything that is, well, you shouldn't play the game because from the first point only you can see that
Krishna is not going to be pleased. Right. Okay. So now we'll continue reading. Go ahead. So we had a little diversion there on psychology. The psychology of action before action. And Krishna consciousness acts on that level. If you remember the 7 points of logic. Go ahead.
Being in a bewildered condition, therefore, the embodied soul identifies himself with the circumstantial material body and becomes subjected to the temporary misery and happiness of life. The Lord is the constant companion of the living entity as Paramatma, or the Supersoul, and therefore he can understand the desires of the individual soul as one can smell the flavor of a flower by being near it. Desire is a subtle form of conditioning for the living entity.
So, can you fool Krishna? Can you hide something from Krishna? Huh? No. He's in your heart. Just like you can smell the aroma of a flower, Krishna in your heart, he can smell your desires. He knows what you're desiring. So, and desire is a subtle form of conditioning for the living entity. Okay, one of the girls explained, what does that mean? Desire is the subtle form of conditioning for the living entities. Who can explain? Go ahead, don't look at each other, just somebody.
what does subtle mean?
Subtle means, like, if I hit you over the head with a hammer, that's not subtle. But if I put some poison in your food, that's subtle. Because you'll eat it without perceiving it until you start choking.
So like you know that someone hit you on the head with a hammer.
Right away.
But you don't know that like you're eating food.
Yes.
Like without knowing you're accepting.
Subtle means, you don't perceive it directly. But once you eat the poisonous food, you start choking, you realize someone poisoned me. So it's no longer subtle. But because you couldn't smell it or taste it when you ate the food, it was a subtle thing. It was not directly perceivable by your senses. But then you directly perceived the effect of it later on. But it's too late by then. Okay?
What does conditioning mean?
Conditioning means that if you keep associating with people who eat meat, eventually what will you do?
That puts you under like
Eventually you might eat meat, right? Right, because they keep saying, "Oh, it's so good. You don't know how good it is, and it makes you feel good, and you do better on your SAT test if you eat a lot of meat the day before." You know, so eventually you think, "Oh, maybe I should eat meat too." You know, that's conditioning.
So the question is, desire is the subtle cause of conditioning?
Desire is the subtle form of conditioning of the living entity. Yes, go ahead.
I think that it means that you don't see it coming, but it becomes poison in the end. Like, desire appears to be sweet at the beginning when you get what you want and you desire for more, but then all you get is a chain of actions and reactions.
Yes, it's subtle in the beginning. You don't realize the effects of it. You think, oh, what's wrong with playing a video game? There's nothing wrong. You just have to kill somebody to get ahead. That's all. It's not a real person I'm killing. But if you kill enough people in virtual reality, eventually you think, well, you become desensitized, and you think, well, maybe I just kill someone for real, because I've already killed so many in virtual reality. Right? So it's a subtle form, the desire is a subtle form of conditioning. So how can you overcome that? Yes, Sanskriti.
By chanting and associating with pure devotees?
Yes, but especially by using the 7 points of logic. Right? The 7 points of logic. And the first point is? Yes. And the second point is?
Do everything not
Reject everything.
Yeah,
Don't do everything unfavorable to Krishna, but reject it.
Yeah, reject everything unfavorable to Krishna.
Yeah, so even those 2 points will immediately defeat the subtle conditioning. Because there are 3 factors, 3 psychological steps you have to go through before you act. What are they?
Do everything favorable to
No.
Krishna.
Yes, go ahead. Thinking, feeling, and willing. So if you use the 7 points of logic before you, on the level of thinking, feeling, and willing, okay, can you listen now? So you can answer the next question, right? Otherwise, you'll be like, I don't know what you said. Okay, so Krishna consciousness can act on the level of thinking, feeling, and willing to help you avoid making mistakes, by which you become conditioned, and then eventually Krishna will say, well, he keeps desiring this nonsense, I'll let him do it. Because it keeps desiring. Right? So desire is a subtle form of conditioning. But you can overcome it by using the 7 points of logic while you're thinking about doing nonsense, feeling how good it'll be if you do nonsense, and then willing, if I don't do nonsense, I'll never be happy. Okay? Go ahead. Sorry.
Prabhu, Hare Krishna Prabhu. I have one question.
Yeah.
So desire is the one which makes you act, right? So how do you know what is the right desire and what is not right?
It doesn't make you act right away.
Yeah.
But if you keep desiring something, you will act.
Okay.
Right? Because you go through the 3 steps, thinking, feeling, and willing, and then you act. So we should only desire. Well, what is the definition of pure devotional service? We already learned this. Point 1. Point 2 and point 3. Anya bilasita sunyam jnana karmarya navritam anukulyena krishnana silanam bhaktirutama. We discussed this a couple weeks ago. Point 1, only do things that are favorable for Krishna. Point 2, you should not desire any profit from the action of devotional service. Material profit. Point 3, no philosophical speculation. And point 4, no vacation. In other words, you should continually serve. But the first 3 points are essential. So, therefore, how can you know if a desire is good or bad? Well, first of all, is it something favorable for Krishna? So, is playing on a video game where you have to kill someone favorable to Krishna? Krishna too? No. But do you like to do it? Huh? Kind of, right? So that desire, that liking to do it, that kind of liking to do it, that's called the tendency to be disobedient. It's coming from previous karma. You have to overcome that. You have to overcome that. Well, it's only by developing respect and love for Guru and Krishna. It's the only way you could overcome that. Like, for example, let's say, and this is not true, right? But let's say your husband is smoking cigarettes, right? So one day you tell him, it's either me or the cigarette. Take a choice, right? So if he loves the cigarette more than you, he says it's the cigarette. But if he loves you more than the cigarette, it says it's you, and he'll throw the cigarette away, right? So love and respect and love can overcome the tendency to be disobedient. It can overcome it. So we have to learn this, the art of creating loving relationships if we want to transform someone from being disobedient to being obedient. Now, there is a way of punishing children in a loving way. And but there's also definitely a way of punishing children in a mean way. So again, that's an art that we have to learn. Jai Shri Radha Nila Madhava Ki Jai. So if you ever want to change a person's behavior, there has to be a relationship of love and respect. Now, to win someone's respect takes a long time. So if you want to be a preacher, a successful preacher, you have to be very tolerant, but you have to be always manifesting good behavior and engaging in loving exchanges. Then people, out of respect and affection, they will listen to what you say. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we'll stop now. We're almost finished. But okay, you finish reading this purport, and then we'll stop.
The Lord fulfills his desire as he deserves. Man proposes and God disposes. The individual is not, therefore, omnipotent in fulfilling his desires.
In other words, you can't do good things and you can't do nonsense unless Krishna helps you. You understand that, Krishna, too? For you to do nonsense, Krishna has to help you do it. So if you keep desiring to do nonsense, he'll help you do it. But if you desire to avoid doing nonsense, he'll help you do that also. And just always serve Krishna, and He'll help you do that. You can't do anything without Krishna's help. You have to understand that.
I heard that you're, like, let's say you're praying to Krishna that I want to become more devotional, but you're not even trying, then Krishna will help you.
Yes, definitely, He will help you. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. What happened to the microphone? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. All right, ask your question.
You were saying there were like 7 points. I forgot what they were. I got the first 4, like do everything favorable and don't do anything unfavorable to Krishna. And then
Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. And then, whenever in doubt, ask Siksha or Diksha Guru. And number 6 is do only those things that are pleasing to Krishna. And number 7 is you can always submit things to the triangle of verification.
Wait, what's the triangle of verification?
You have 3 points in a triangle, right? You have Guru, you have Krishna and his words or Shastra, you have Acharyas, and you have Guru. What? 7th point? Always submit things to the triangle of verification. If someone says, hey, jumping off this cliff is fun. And you say, 1 second, triangle of verification. Did Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita, jump off a cliff? No. Did the Acharya say jump off a cliff? No. I'll call up my guru and ask him, should I jump off a cliff? No. I close the triangle. Hey, you go first and I'll just see how much fun it is, Okay? So always submit things to the triangle of verification. Okay, now continue reading.
The Lord, however, can fulfill all desires, and the Lord, being neutral to everyone, does not interfere with the desires of the minute independent living entities. However, when one desires Krishna, the Lord takes special care and encourages one to desire in such a way that one can attain Him and be eternally happy.
Haribol.
The Vedic hymns therefore declare, Esha yu hyeva sadhu karma karyati tam yam ebhyo lokebhya unini sade. Esha yu eva sadhu karma karyati yam ado ninishyate. The Lord engages the living entity in pious activities so that he may be elevated. The Lord engages him in impious activities so that he may go to hell.
Kaushitaki
Upanishad 3.8. Agnya jantar anishoyam atmana sukha dukhayo ishvara prerito gachit swargam vasvabhramevacha.
Very good.
The living entity is completely dependent in his distress and happiness. By the will of the Supreme, he can go to heaven or hell as a cloud is driven by the air. Therefore, the embodied soul, by his immemorial desire to avoid Krishna consciousness, causes his own bewilderment. Consequently, although he is constitutionally eternal, blissful, and cognizant due to the littleness of his existence, he forgets his constitutional position of service to the Lord and is thus entrapped by
nescience, meaning ignorance.
And under the spell of ignorance, the living entity claims that the Lord is responsible for his conditional existence.
It's all his fault. It's not my fault. It's all his fault. Yeah.
The Vedanta Sutras 2.1.34 also confirms this.
Vaishamya Nirgrinye
Nasapek Satvat Tata Hi Darshayati. The Lord never hates nor
neither
likes
hates.
Neither hates nor likes anyone, though he appears to.
Points discussed, and then we'll stop after that.
People sometimes, in the course of achieving something material, work very hard and become obsessed by it and stress themselves out. This causes them to fall sick and sometimes even die. Krishna is not responsible for this, but it's the living entity who decided to push himself beyond normal capacity.
Yeah, there was a person in Hong Kong. He played video games without sleeping for about 3-4 days, and he died. He died. He wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping, wasn't drinking. He was just playing video games, and he died. So, and that's a true story. So you see, you push yourself to do nonsense, and you'll end up dead, or at least you'll end up in a very dire condition. Go ahead, read the second one.
People are working hard to be happy, but this happiness is not eternal. Krishna is promising eternal happiness. People refuse to believe this because they are trained to believe that everything material is real and everything spiritual is a fairy tale. We have been trained to think, do things that give us material benefits and disregard spiritual things. This is the end result of material education.
Haribol, material education, key. No, key, boo, not jai. Okay, so we'll stop right there and continue tomorrow. We're going over last week's class, but we added things today. We added the 3 points of psychology. We added how to overcome the disposition or the tendency to be disobedient. And then how to overcome how Krishna consciousness can act on the 3 levels of psychological steps before action.